Chapter 21. Petrillo. In the short space of time as the creature considered him, Jack took in its bizarre appearance. It was almost entirely black, with feathers sticking out at odd angles from its shoulders and head. The only part of the creature not covered in black feathers or fur was a slender mask. It was the shape one might expect to see at a masquerade, with bone-white material that curved outward into a long, sharp vulture's beak. Despite these bird-like features, its body more closely resembled a monkey, with slender arms ending in paws much larger but not unlike his own. They curved out into sharp talons, which dug into the carpet as a monkey tail swished back and forth above its head, playfully. If this was who he thought it was, it looked a lot less like a griffin than he would have expected. "Petrillo?" he asked, disbelieving. The creature spun on the spot and dashed toward the door. It moved at first on all fours, like a scurrying ape, and bounded toward the other four, who had all stopped in the hallway in surprise. "Hey!" Sprint cried out as the creature bowled him to the ground. It bounded from the right wall to the left and back, landing in the open window above the door. It perched up there, its long tail dangling, and turned again toward Jack. Without thinking, without responding as he passed his confused friends, Jack tore off down the hall. When he neared the door below the creature, it spun around and leapt from the window. Jack crashed through the door and into the night. He glanced frantically up and down the path, but the creature had vanished. A few staffers were stopped along the pathway, looking in surprise toward the building across from the barracks. Following their gaze, he spotted the shadowy figure pressed out of the wall like a gargoyle. It climbed the rain spout, gracefully crested the top, then stood erect, peering down at Jack. They watched each other for a moment. Jack made the first move, darting toward the building. Reciprocating, the creature disappeared behind the wall. Jack rounded the corner, far enough from the building to keep an eye on the creature as it bounded along the rooftop, hurtled over the edge, and crashed feet first into the foliage of a tree. Jack jogged to a stop, expecting the creature to fall injured to the ground. Instead, it swung from the lowest branch without missing a beat, landed on all fours, then stood and took off in a dash across the lawn. "Wait!" Jack called as the creature disappeared over a tall hedge. Moving along the dense network of leaves, he found a small gap and forced his way through. On the other side, he recognized the lawn that stretched out toward the suburban housing on the far end, and the president's mansion to his left. There was a whoosh of wind, and Sprint appeared. "What in the world is going on?" he asked, limping along the damp grass to where Jack stood. "Who was that? Was that—" He fell silent as he spotted the dark figure. Petrillo was standing only yards away, unmoving, its head bent to the side, seeming to size Sprint up. "Push me one more time, I dare you," the squirrel said, his voice lowering an octave as he stepped toward the creature, doing a bad job of disguising his limp. Without warning, the creature charged at him, ramming square into his chest. Sprint landed on his back, his wind knocked out in a cough. It stood over him, pressed a foot into the squirrel's wounded ankle, and applied pressure. Sprint cried out in pain. Moving to Sprint's aid, Jack faltered as the creature turned on him, squatting like a jungle cat ready to pounce. Instead of attacking, however, it turned toward the president's mansion and tore off across the field. As Jack dropped to Sprint's side, a panting figure jogged up to them. "What's going on?" Hoover wheezed. "I'm fine, Jack," Sprint said, sitting up with a wince. "Go." Hoping he wasn't already too late, Jack turned and ran after the creature. At first he couldn't see it, and simply ran into the darkness blindly. The light beyond the president's gate was bright, and as Jack squinted into it, he saw the dark silhouette of the figure rushing toward the fence. The creature scaled the gate without trouble, perched itself on top, and turned again toward Jack. "Give it back!" Jack said as he approached, clutching a stitch at his side. The creature dropped down on the other side of the gate, then moved across the driveway on its knuckles, glancing over its shoulder as if seeing whether he was following. "What am I doing?" he thought as he neared the gate. He would lose his position on the team if he was caught. Then again, if Petrillo exposed that Jack had the key, his fate would be worse, much worse. Swearing under his breath, he hooked one foot into the gate, then clumsily climbed over. His eyes fell on a lit window beyond the oak tree at the center of the drive. Somebody was home. He walked in a crouch across the cobblestone, looking at an expensive silver car parked in a carport to the left. Petrillo stood on the carport roof, and as Jack drew closer, the creature stepped to the wall of the mansion, grabbed hold of a drainpipe, and began climbing. Wondering how Petrillo had managed to get up there so quickly, he spotted a stack of crates along the outside pillar and pushed himself up onto them. Adjusting the strap of his messenger bag, he leaped to the nearest beam of the open carport roof, knocking the crates over with his flailing legs. When he'd pulled himself up, he stepped cautiously along the beam, arms stretched out, until he reached the drainpipe. There was hardly room to fit his fingers behind it. He'd have to find another way up. A window to his left was lit, shining upon construction scaffolding that moved up along the far edge of the house. He crept along the roof of the carport, his eyes trained upward to the spot where Petrillo had disappeared. If he lost Petrillo, he lost the key Dr. Walraven had stolen from Animal Control, had died to protect. From who? Petrillo? Had Jack, in his quest for adventure, delivered the key right to the one from whom Dr. Walraven had been protecting it? And what if Petrillo was on the roof when he got up there? He could no sooner catch him than get down from this carport without that scaffolding. Whether he continued to follow, or slunk away in defeat, he'd have to make it past that window. He crouched low and moved below the light. "Searched every square inch of the place," a voice was saying. "And what did you find?" This voice was President Brisk. "Nothing whatsoever," said a third voice, a horribly familiar voice. "Little runt must have taken it with him. Why don't we just arrest him? Have him searched?" There was a brief pause. "No, if he doesn't have it on him, he'll know we suspect him, and then we'll never find it." "And if he makes a move for the tree?" asked the familiar voice. Brisk let out an angry roar. At the same time, there was a loud crashing sound, as though something had been toppled over. Another pause. Brisk inhaled a calming breath, and spoke again. "We have him here now. The safe haven affair is already set in motion. I couldn't stop it even if I wanted to. But if I don't get that key before the gate opens, it will all have been for nothing. Nothing!" He shouted the last word, and again there was the sound of something toppling over. There was silence again, and then he spoke, his voice calm once more. "Good thing I didn't rely on Plan A. So you hired him just to keep him here?" "Yes," Brisk said. "It was Alan's idea. Bring the kid on. He'll slip up eventually. I hired that whole useless team just to keep him here. Looks like I made the right choice." Feeling lightheaded, Jack lowered himself to sit on the scaffolding. Brisk had sent the wolves to kill Dr. Walraven? To get the key? Worse, Alan was in on it. And now Jack had brought it right to them. Was Petrillo about to drop in and present Brisk with the key? With this thought in mind, Jack stood slowly, gripping the windowsill, and peered anxiously into the room. The three of them were at the center of a garage, a full story below him. Brisk was facing away, leaning against a stack of boxes, hanging his head. More boxes were scattered across the floor. A goat in a black suit and tie watched him without expression, and on the other side, the familiar wolf fidgeted with a sling around the shoulder he had dislocated at the mill. His piercing silver eyes flicked up to the window. Jack threw himself backward. He lost his balance, slipped between the beams of the open carport, landed hard on the roof of the car. The alarm blared, a pulsating honk that seemed deafening in the still night. Jack tumbled off the roof of the car, landing on his tailbone. The rhythmic flash of orange parking lights splashed against the wall as he sat upright and scooted his back to the car. There were footsteps, voices. They were coming from the front side of the house. His heart pounding, Jack peeked around the side of the car. They weren't visible yet, but they sounded close. He hid once more, holding his breath and listening. Something dropped next to him. Turning quickly, he began to cry out, but a paw clapped over his mouth and nose. There was a sharp odor, like the chemical smell of rubbing alcohol. It burned in his nostrils. His eyes began to water, and he gave a muffled yell, grabbing uselessly at the slender black arms. His attempts to fight grew weaker, and he was lowered to his back. That same white vulture mask peered down at him through empty black sockets. As everything else faded to blackness, only the mask remained, cocked to the side, considering. And then all was silent.